Hello, my name is Ethan Porter. I'm excited today to present research co-authored with Yamil Velez and Thomas Wood. I am a professor at George Washington. Yamil is at Columbia, Tom is at Ohio State. Our research is called Factual Corrections, Eliminate False Beliefs about COVID-19 Vaccines. We are paper 54 in this conference. The title of this paper gives away the conclusion. I'm telling you the end of the story now, which is that we find that factual corrections do what we say they'll do, which is that they eliminate false beliefs about COVID vaccines. I'm going to walk you through the experiment, the motivating ideas behind it, and our results. But first, just so we're all on the same page here, let me show you a little bit about what it is we're talking about in particular, what it is we're trying to correct. If you're on social media, you may be familiar with these kinds of stories. If you're not on social media, you may not be. Misinformation is prevalent. Misinformation is widespread. And to get a sense of what it looks like when it comes to COVID-19 vaccines, this is a claim that went viral on Twitter, and it alleges that COVID-19 vaccines, particularly the mRNA varieties, are actually going to alter your DNA. This is a false claim about COVID-19 vaccines that is circulated widely. And if you look at some observational sources of data, you see that, in fact, this claim is all around the world. This claim is prevalent. People believe that their DNA will be altered if they get a COVID vaccine. Here's another sort of typical kind of false claim, which is that mass vaccinations actually are resulting in death. This is from April of 2020, and the claim is simply that getting vaccinated for COVID was actually causing people to die. Now, of course, if you know the trajectory of this disease at all, you know that this is sort of nonsensical. But this fake news and misinformation about the vaccines have been out there for a while, and they're everywhere. Now, these are pretty dark. This is one of my favorite ones, though, which is that Pope Francis says that the COVID vaccine will now be required to enter heaven. He did not say that, just so we're all aware. This is actually produced by something called the Babylon Bee. Which is a satirical site that is often picked up and understood to be non-satirical. So these are the kind of false claims we're talking about. Now, this last one in particular is sort of funny, but ultimately, this phenomenon of misinformation and false claims about COVID vaccines can have really serious consequences. Lumba and colleagues published a paper in Nature Human Behavior earlier this year, in which they find that actually exposure to misinformation about COVID vaccines reduces willingness to get a COVID-19 vaccine. So, some of these are funny, but ultimately the consequences are real. Misinformation about about vaccines threatens to prolong the pandemic, full stop. That being said, we know from prior work, some of which my co-authors and I have done together, that factual corrections reduce belief in misinformation. So factual corrections, which are just simple rebuttals, point by point, can have the effect of just correcting people and making their beliefs more accurate. My co-authors and I have shown that, and meta-analyses has confirmed this basic result. That fact checks reduce false beliefs. For vaccines, however, the evidence is more mixed. There's some evidence that even correcting misstatements about vaccines can actually entrench misperceptions about them. Corrections might also reduce intention to get vaccinated. So what works in general might not work here. Might not work for COVID-19 vaccines. Now, despite the sort of mixed evidence on misinformation about vaccines In fact checks, social media companies and journalists have done quite a bit of work to try and rebut misinformation about COVID. Again, this may be familiar to you if you're a regular user of social media, but if not, or either way, here's a glimpse of what it can look like. This is on Facebook. If this is a claim that basically says that political leaders who deny COVID vaccines are dying or sort of being killed as a result of this. That's the insinuation, at least. And as you can see at the bottom here, Facebook provides a fact check where they say this is partly false. So this is sort of Facebook's attempt to issue a factual correction. You can then click, see why, and get linked to a fact check. Now, what is a fact check? This is sort of a classic example. This is a fact check produced by PolitiFact, which is a neutral, nonpartisan fact-checking organization, fact-checking a viral Facebook post, which claim, as you can see, the viral post said, look, I'm not going to get the vaccine because it's actually better for me not to get the vaccine, because if I get the vaccine, I actually will be at higher risk because of side effects, plus what the vaccine is doing to me in terms of sort of giving me COVID. This is a false claim. PolitiFact rebuts this claim. And Facebook will often link to this kind of work, this kind of fact-checking work. What you'll notice here, and I want to bring your attention to this as well, is that there are various elements of the fact check that might be important. So there's a false verdict, that is a visual verdict. You'll also see here that in its fact check, PolitiFact is actually reiterating the false claim. So they don't just say, hey, be on the lookout for posts encouraging you not to take the vaccine. They actually repeat verbatim, word for word, what it is that the misinformation is alleging. Keep that in mind. So social media companies, journalists, journalistic organizations like PolitiFact are issuing fact checks. We don't really know if they work when it comes to COVID. Fundamentally, we're not sure. There is good evidence from prior researchers that actually misinformation degrades vaccine intention. So what do fact checks do? Can fact checks decrease false beliefs about COVID-19 vaccines? This is a sort of a basic question, which again, other work on vaccines and misinformation has answered in the negative or answered with mixed results. Can these fact checks also affect willingness to get a vaccine? So maybe fact checks work insofar as they increase factual accuracy and make people have more accurate beliefs about vaccines, but they actually cause people to become more skeptical of vaccines and say, you know what, I'm not going to get vaccinated. That's possible. And here's another question. Do any of these formatting differences in fact checks make a difference? So look at all the bells and whistles that PolitiFact has up here. PolitiFact, has a visual verdict. They're reiterating the claim that they attribute the claim to circulating via Facebook. So there are all these sort of things that fact checks do. Scholars such as Emily Vraga, David Rand, Penny Cook, Letitia Bode, there are many, many scholars who've investigated, well, what formatting choices might be most effective. And we're going to investigate this as well. In the context of COVID, do formatting make differences in fact checks make a difference? And if so, which formatting differences might be best? Those are sort of the big questions driving this. Here's the experimental design. This is it's a rather elaborate experimental design. We wanted to do a lot at once with this study. So I'm going to walk you through it. We tested 10 false claim correction pairs. So what is a false claim correction pair? So it might be the false claim that mRNA vaccines alter DNA, and the corresponding correction would say, no, that's not the case. mRNA vaccines do not alter DNA. And we actually provide the factual correction from PolitiFact, the neutral fact-checking website. At the same time, we also provided the misinfo as it appeared and as it was circulating, because we wanted to really achieve as much realism as possible in this study. For each pair of false claims and corrections, participants are randomly assigned to either see the misinformation followed by a fact check, or just be assigned to control and just answer questions about the pair without having seen the misinformation or the fact check. We enrolled participants in 3 trials. Each trial consisted of a test of a distinct false claim correction pair. And we tested 10 different pairs, and you could not see the same pair twice. So if we tested a fact check about the Pope requiring a COVID vaccination to get into heaven in trial 1, we weren't going to put you in that pair in trial 3. After every single trial, we measured factual beliefs by asking participants to assess the accuracy of the false claim. This is an approach that we've done before, that my co-authors and I have used in various studies. And essentially, we would ask you to agree or disagree with the statement, something like mRNA vaccines alter DNA. We actually got at this in a variety of ways. We asked agree, disagree with the false claim. We also then ask you to share your confidence in your belief. There's some concern that maybe different ways of assessing accuracy might result in different answers. Okay, we asked about facts and factual accuracy after every trial, but only after the first trial, we measured vaccination intent and attitudes toward vaccines, just using common off-the-shelf batteries here. Now here's the thing. I said we also wanted to look at fact checks in the formatting features of fact checks. Whenever someone was assigned to a fact check, we further randomized formatting features of that fact check. So some people who saw a fact check would see a fact check with a headline, others without it. Some with a visual verdict, right, where it would say false. Others would not see it. We also made edits to the fact checks. Some people saw longer fact checks, other people saw shorter fact checks. Sometimes we identified the source of the false claim, other times we did not. We enrolled 5,025 people last spring. We used US-based convenience samples that have been widely used in the study of misinformation. It's a sizable sample. So what did we find? Oh, before I tell you that, I should also tell you, everyone went through an extensive debriefing protocol explaining that any misinformation they were exposed to was in fact misinformation. Note that not everyone was exposed to misinformation, but those who were received an extensive debriefing, consistent with IRB and ethical standards. Here's an example of a formatting change before I give you the results. This is just a formatting change that you can see here. This is a real fact check we looked at, which fact checked a false claim that the Gates Foundation is going to profit off of the corona vaccine. So if you were in this trial, right, if in your trial you were assigned to evaluate a fact check, we might have removed the Facebook identification of source, we might have removed the headline, etc. Example of misinfo. This is from what you might have seen previously, if you recall, from just a few minutes ago. Here's an example of some misinformation we tested. A false claim circulated widely, which said that people died during COVID trials. Okay, effects, finally. Here are the effects. On the left panel, we've isolated misinformation effects for each item. On the right panel, we've isolated correction effects. So what's a misinformation effect? A misinformation effect is just the effect of the misinformation compared to control. A correction effect is the effect of the fact check compared to the misinformation. And you see a pretty consistent story emerge, which is that across items, misinformation degrades factual accuracy, And correction effects improve factual accuracy. Each row is a different pair that we tested. Up at the top, you see that Pope claims this false claim that the Pope is going to require vaccination to enter heaven. What you can see is that the fact check of that claim, making sure people understand it's false, makes them more accurate, and the misinformation alone makes them less accurate. That's mostly the pattern we see, although as you might note, in general, the correction effects tend to be larger than the misinformation effects across all items. One other thing I want to say before summarizing, giving you some more results here, is that we chose fact check misinfo pairs based on two criteria. One, we needed there to be a fact check, and two, we wanted to come across some observational or impressionistic evidence that this false claim had circulated widely. We looked at crowd tangle data. We really tried to get a sense of stories that were circulating because we didn't just want to correct stuff that didn't matter to people. We wanted to correct stuff that might actually matter. Here's a nice way of summarizing our results. These are just agreements with the accurate position on a 4-point scale. What you can see here, we've just collapsed all our results and we've been bootstrapped 1,000 times. And what you can see here is that the fact check profoundly makes people more accurate than the misinformation item, right? So misinformation in general reduces accuracy. It makes people less accurate. Control also, people in control are pretty accurate as well. Misinformation does degrade factual accuracy in powerful ways, but fact checks reverse it in the sense that people who were exposed to fact checks after seeing misinformation are substantially more accurate than they would be had they never seen the misinformation in the first place. So misinformation has pernicious effects, but gosh, the effects on factual accuracy that result from fact checks, quite significant. Okay, so that's one headline finding. Fact checks do work, and that's why I told you that the headline of this paper is sort of giving it away. But there's some other interesting results that are null or nullish, which I'll just summarize for you really quickly. The first is that null effects for vaccine intent. We do not see any evidence that corrections or misinformation is making people more or less willing to get vaccinated. This is a surprise. As I said earlier, there is some prior evidence showing that misinfo can reduce willingness to get vaccinated. We don't see that at all, nor do we see fact checks improving vaccine intent. What are vaccine attitudes, general attitudes? We asked people to share their views toward vaccines post-treatment, just using a sort of a standard battery. It's a similar story, though you see some, you can glimpse and get a picture of the fact that it looks like the fact check makes people marginally more positive toward vaccines. We don't see huge differences, which I think is quite notable. Now, you may be asking, okay, what about party? I think that's a big one, especially in the pandemic in the United States. We know the response to the pandemic has been heavily politicized along predictable partisan lines. But guess what? It doesn't turn out to be the case that only Democrats are becoming more accurate or only Republicans are becoming less accurate. What you can see here is that correction effects, the point estimate for correction effects, are actually largest for Republicans. Now, of course, the difference is not significant, and the differences between the three are not significant, but it should sort of temper your fears that this story is solely explained by just Democrats becoming way more accurate. Similarly, the point estimate on misinformation is largest for Democrats, again, not significant. I think part of what's going on here may just be ceiling effects, but it's not the case that Republicans see corrections about COVID and become less accurate than they were. That's just not what's happening. It's not the case that only Republicans respond to misinformation by becoming less accurate. That's not what's happening. The effects are largely, they're not entirely consistent across party lines. What about formatting effects? We estimate the average marginal sort of component effect, which is one way of breaking down each sort of minuscule effect of all the features that we randomized. This is similar to our conjoint experiment, but instead of text, we're using visual features that we've randomized. Here is, I think, the big claim or the big finding is that the small randomized changes we made to formatting features didn't really do a whole heck of a lot compared to just basic fact checks. The general effects of formatting effects were really small. Sorry, the general effects of formatting changes were really small. We didn't see people becoming far more accurate when we included the source, or when we included a visual verdict, or when we minimized the misinfo. None of those made as large a difference as the fact checks themselves did. Another way of thinking about these results is that no-frills fact checks work really well. You might get some additional leverage over formatting modifications or through formatting modifications, but the no-frills fact check is doing most of the work. So to return to the headline of all of this, factual corrections eliminate false beliefs about COVID-19 vaccines. Now you sort of know this is a sort of robust conclusion, but there are things left unsaid. Now, again, corrections consistently rebut false beliefs, but accuracy improvements do not change downstream behaviors. In this case, we don't see accuracy improvements leading to increased intent to vaccinate. In earlier work, my co-authors and I have found that you can correct Trump supporters about various false claims he made, and those corrections will make them more accurate, but they become no less eager to vote for Donald Trump. A similar dynamic seems to obtain here, whereby correcting false claims about COVID-19 vaccines makes people more accurate across party lines, but doesn't really make a dent on vaccination intent. In fact, neither misinformation nor fact checks affect vaccine intent. That's really interesting and a departure from prior research. Finally, formatting changes matter little compared to the extent that fact checks matter on their own. In other words, the no-frills fact check does quite a bit. These small tweaks we can make may make a difference at the margin, to be sure, but they're not magic bullets. The largest effect is attributable to just the no-frills fact check. Now, why does our research depart from previous research? Now, I think we're able to see everyone becoming more accurate once they see a correction about the COVID vaccine, about COVID vaccines, because, not everyone, but on average, across party groups. I think that's because the COVID-19 vaccine is new. People don't yet have the specific informational resources to call upon to counter-argue the factual corrections. Those who are generally opposed to vaccines have years and years of information to draw upon when they're fighting back against corrections to vaccine misperceptions. It's not really the case yet for those who are skeptical of COVID-19 vaccines. Okay, so why is it that we're actually able to repeatedly improve factual accuracy? I think it's because of the quality of our fact checks. Again, to increase realism, to maximize realism, we relied on real fact checks that, for the formatting part of the study, we did make modifications to, but for the most part, what we're doing is actually working with really high quality PolitiFact fact checks. In some research, scholars design their own fact checks, and oftentimes they have good reason to do so, but ultimately scholars are not fact checkers. It helps to rely on the pros. the final thing I want to tell you, and I guess I just clicked the start button again, but the final thing I want to tell you, this is sort of exciting, is that we have broadly replicated these results in 9 other countries. Hopefully we will make that public soon, but that's, I suppose, a spoiler for the next project. And the implication though is that this is not some US specific finding. It's not the case that only in the US people respond to fact checks about COVID-19 vaccines by becoming more accurate. That's pretty much the case in many other places around the globe. Thank you so much.